this meeting to order. Welcome everybody back from May, and I'm glad everybody got here okay. The weather's been just different. Are there any questions on the agenda? All right, is there anything on the consent agenda that anybody wants to talk about in particular? Or would you like Mr. Gill to run through it right quick, or Mr. Clardy or somebody?
I would tell you this, there was a lot of, first of all, you probably noticed on there that we pulled a portable bid off there because it looks like our, that program with Heroes, which was a program where we reduced teacher ratio in the 4th grade, then the following year in the 5th grade. I think it's going to come to fruition, but it won't be until the year after next. The government's still trying to line up the money. So there wasn't any point in putting that portable bid out there, so we yanked that. But we still have high hopes that we'll be able to do that the following year.
Ms. Jernigan.
On the routine bids, I guess my question is, why would the cafeterias need 3 Ford vans? Have they had similar vehicles? Or are they being replaced? Or
I think the protocol has changed a little bit with respect to how we transport food. From when we satellite, we have to have different kind of ovens inside or heaters inside. Jeff, you want to explain it?
The health department folks have tightened up on the requirements for transporting that food in containers that are at the proper temperature and all that. And we've been using some cars.
would it be well to explain that Thursday night? I don't know if we're being televised tonight or not.
We are not, but we can go back over it.
Because this is not 17 times 3, and I doubt that very many people in our viewing audience would understand why we have to have these 3 vehicles.
Sure, I'd be happy to do it.
Any other questions? Donald?
Just food service has calculated this cost versus with the transportation cost and everything. They still think this is the way to go with the satellite schools.
Yeah, but we do. You know, several schools over time, and I can't go back into history and name them, but they just simply couldn't make it, couldn't break even. Right. Cost a lot in particular case. Who we satelliting, Jeff? Daniel McKee, Campus,
Smyrna West, Campus, and Holloway.
And to bring them on board and buy all the equipment necessary and all, it would just be substantial with respect to cost. So that, and plus they wouldn't serve that many. So this is indeed, we think, the best way to do it.
And I don't doubt that.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else? Okay, let's go on. Mr. Gil, Dr. Gilbert's going to address the board tomorrow night?
Yeah, I think she wants to offer thanks to adult ed program. It'll be brief.
Let's see, okay, let's go to number 9.
Oakland High School International Baccalaureate in Athletics. There have been a high number of zoning exemption applications for student athletes to transfer to Oakland High School for the International Baccalaureate program. Other high school principals have concerns about it, and I wanted the board to be aware of their concerns before we proceed with approving the applications in question. I'm not asking you to do anything, but there's a sheet over here that reflects. James, you want to come up here and explain it? You and I discussed it, but I think you understand the numbers better. And part of the dilemma, I don't know if it's a dilemma at all, but there are more and more kids, in particular, Laverne High and that end of the county, they're enrolling into the International Baccalaureate program. And there's not a minimum score that has to be made, or there's not a minimum GPA. I think originally when we did this, and I think it's been successful, many of us thought that it would eventually lead to inroads for a lot of those kids getting into the Dukes, the Vanderbilts, the more prestigious schools, but more and more of these guys go in simply don't have those kind of capabilities academically, and a lot of them wind up playing athletics at Oakland, whereby they might have played at these other schools. Now, I don't know if that's an issue to the board or not. That's the reason I'm bringing it up tonight. But
It kind of proves that what we planned was working, because we were trying to get kids to go to Oakland. We were trying to get, to help Oakland High School. It was having some problems, and it seems to me
Well, it
that
is.
what we're doing is working.
But now, if you're the principal's losing those guys, and I'm hearing it more and more on a pretty regular basis, and I'm not advocating doing anything. If I were, it might be to start looking on that end of the county, start up an IB program down there if it's becoming that successful. But that said, there's a concern among the high school principals that a lot of their athletes are lining up at Oakland. They don't necessarily say they're recruiting or anything else. But James, go over some numbers real quick.
Sure. Mr. Gill asked me to put together just the raw data of what we were seeing. I'm going to jump around a little bit. If you look at the very bottom of that sheet, that tells you the current students who are already at Oakland on the IB program on a zone exemption. There are 36. I had the school gather this information for me. Of those, 11 are student athletes that play one or more sports. So that's a pretty small number in comparison. This year, we've had more than that. We're seeing a trend where there are more student athletes who are going to the school. Not making any accusations of why they're doing that. It's just a trend that we're seeing. We've had primarily 2 schools raise concerns about it, and so Mr. Gill asked me to put together the numbers so the board's aware of what their concerns are. So far this year, we have approved 40 requests to Oakland High School. That's the top part of the form there. 19 of those are for student athletes, so about half. On the left, it shows the breakdown of the various sports that they've indicated on their applications that they would like to try out for. There are more numbers there than students because some students play multiple sports, so those won't add up if you try to add them up. But on the right side of that box, you'll see where those students are zoned to attend. You'll see that Laverne High School 13 and Siegel 4. Those are primarily the 2 schools that have been affected. The bottom, the middle box there shows the applications that we have pending, and those are ready to approve. We can get them out tomorrow if the board sees no objection. But it shows the breakdown, a very similar breakdown of what sports they've shown interest in playing and what schools they're zoned to attend.
Could I ask what the present enrollment is at Oakland and what's projected for next year as opposed to Laverne, and I believe Siegel was one of the ones that several come from?
Siegel, Laverne, and Smyrna High School will all be right around 2,000 next year. That's the projection, give or take 40 students. That's where they are. I'm not sure of the exact enrollment at Oakland. Last I saw, it was close to 1,600.
So there's room at Oakland.
Absolutely.
The point is they do have some capacity, so it's not a capacity issue.
No, Oakland does have capacity, availability.
Terry?
I'm going to make a few comments, and let me just start out by saying, number one, I'm disappointed this thing's even been brought to the board. I think we're being very unfair to Mr. Spurlock, administration, students. Basically, you've got some coaches out here basically saying they're trying to recruit athletes, which I met Mr. Spurlock last week, and he assured me that hadn't been done. And it really bothers me that we've got a school of choice here, open enrollment school, and people, are using this IB program. I mean, if we go to open enrollment, which that's what the board has, I mean, why do we stop in the middle of the game just approving these kids? I mean, and on top of that, you're approving these kids just because they play athletics. You approve some of them you haven't approved, and it just doesn't make a lick of sense to me. I mean, 7 or 8 years ago, when Oakland was cooked to the woodshed, if you want to say, who cared about them then? Kids want to go to Oakland. They want to go to Oakland. These kids going from Laverne High School, you think they're going out there just for athletics? I mean, would you drive your child from Laverne down to Oakland?
Well, they'd be shuttled now.
Well, it'd be shuttled now, but they wasn't gonna be shuttled when we brought the issue up. So I don't know I really don't know what the intention is here. But I can assure you that every time a principal has brought a violation out here to the superintendent, whether it's you or before, it hasn't ever been brought out and open to the board like this before, or to the general public. So I don't know what's going on here, but, you know, I think who's making these accusations, owes Mr. Spurlock a phone call, somebody does.
Well, first of all, James didn't put a hold on it, I did, so he bears none of the responsibility for putting a hold on. We never intended not to continue to approve, but I think it's our responsibility to tell the board that there are people out there that are saying, coaches and principals, that Oakland may be using the IB program as an instrument to get kids into school. Now, whether they are or not, we don't have time to research. We don't have time to investigate. I asked Mr. Spurlock. He assured me, like Mr. Hodge said, that they're not doing any of those things. But my point in bringing this up was simply to say, this is what's being said. Is there anything we want to do about it? Do we want to continue to do business as usual? Do we want to look into it? Or do we just give them, or do we just sign on and let them go? Because, in fact, I mean, I don't know how much athletics matters. I know it matters to the individual schools in this county, and I know they're concerned that all these guys are leaving. But I can do what you want, but I kind of view it differently, Terry. I view it that I owed it to you guys to let you know I'd gotten calls from coaches and principals saying, hey, this isn't right. We're losing our athletes, whether they're recruiting or not, we're losing them. Is there something you guys can do to consider that? And that's all we're doing tonight. I'm not asking you to take any kind of action. I just thought you guys ought to know this being said.
Got two down here first, and
I don't know that Terry's through.
No, go ahead, I'll come up finally in here.
Are the ones seeking transfer, they all, or movement, are they all freshmen?
All but one. There's
All
only
but
one that's a sophomore.
How can a sophomore get involved in the IB program?
Yes, sir. This IB program typically starts their junior year.
Okay. So, next question. They get in the IB program, they find it's not what they thought it was going to be. Maybe it's far more difficult, maybe it's not, again, something they wish to participate in. Once they get there, what are we gonna do with them? And they leave the program.
Well, they stay there, or they lose that. If they're playing sports, they lose athletic eligibility. They couldn't return to any of their other schools and participate unless they sit out a year, which has been one of the issues. They don't really start the IB portion of it till their junior year. So like you say, the first 2 years could go by, and if they don't end up partaking in IB, that's, there, and some of the people think they're going for the athletic reason.
did you have a question?
And I think Doris might have gotten it part of mine. So there are a total of 53 applications.
Yes, sir.
So those are in addition to the 36.
The 36 have been from previous years.
So, and did you say that most, if not all, or most of those 53 are for freshmen?
All but one is what I have listed.
Okay. There's two things here. I think as a board, we made a strong statement of support in favor of IB, and I don't want to backtrack from that. Not that you're suggesting that, but
Sure.
And when we made that statement, I think we all understood, and more than that, we all said that we would allow students from all parts of the county, in fact, encourage students from other parts of the county to come to that. And so now it appears to be working. Now, I understand that it's brought this wrinkle with it in terms of athletics that I don't know that we anticipated. And that's unfortunate, but I think the main goal is to keep IB going. I'd be curious to know if there's any procedure in place to, and maybe not. I mean, as Terry says, we have had the attitude that it's an open school, that they could come there even if they didn't want to go to IB. Is that Is that our policy toward Oakland now, that we'll sign off on any?
As long as Mr. Spurlock is in support of it, there have been a few that have been behavior issues, things like that.
And also, for example, if you apply for your normal zone exemption and you put you're an athlete, we don't let athletes transfer system-wide on zone exemptions.
So then it's not truly an open enrollment then, is that what you're saying?
No, but we have taken all IB applications.
And a majority of the zone exemptions for that school have been approved until we pause for this to bring it to the board.
Terry, let me get Wayne, and then we'll get back to you, because
Thank you. Doris already asked my question.
Grant, did you have a question?
Well, I just want to say about the numbers, obviously, that we did have some space available there, obviously, and then obviously from Laverne and some other schools in Siegel, and that was the two main ones, obviously that gives some relief. Again, I don't know all the details, I mean, I may not know, anybody know all the details and the motives, but we did, as Dr. Burns said, we did go on the idea of trying to make it attractive for people that want to go there, and it's worked. And as far as the details and individuals, I mean, we might not know that tonight, might not ever know it, but sometimes you get into that. When you open a new school, even if it's a new school, people have a tendency to move there, and they can do it legally, and so we still have, I don't think we have really a problem with it.
Terry?
I'm gonna say a couple more things, and I'll quit. Back to the open enrollment, as far as, it's hard for me to understand when they put on that application, they're an athlete, how you can sit there and take a student that's not an athlete with no problem at all, and this other one you're going, raise red flags on. I don't know how you could. Mr. Reed, he may be able to answer that better than I can, but I'm not a lawyer, but to me, I don't know how in the world you can do it.
We're not necessarily advocating doing that. I guess the point is, I thought we could have a civil discussion to say this is being brought out, and some of the high school principals are concerned about it, and I wanted to make sure that the board wanted to have the same position they've held all along, which I don't have an issue with. I don't have an issue tomorrow, and we've said that in all likelihood, we'll sign all 19 tomorrow and they'll go. But at some point, someone was going to conclude, this is, from an athletic perspective, it's not fair because they could, not that they're doing it, and I'm not suggesting that they are, but they could use this as a real instrument for recruiting athletes into Oakland.
Let me ask a question at this point. Can I? Sure. Well, we put the IB program at Oakland High School to help it when it was restructured. We're restructuring Laverne High School at this point. Is it possible to think about putting an IB program at Laverne High School, and we'd have one on each end of the county? I don't know, if it helped Oakland, it certainly could help Laverne High School the same. I think that's probably, that would be my suggestion, to look into that. While you're thinking about that, Mr. Blair, do you have a question?
Have we had any instance that we're aware of where a child has gone to Oakland for the IB program and just did not enter the IB program and became just an athlete without that?
The school tracks that, but we don't track that from a zone exemption perspective.
Just since this is on the agenda, and there may not be any more talk at all about it after tonight, but is that something we could find out by Thursday if there's ever been those instances where they really never entered the IB program?
Well, and there's two different ways of looking at entering the IB program. You can take individual courses, and I believe if you take up to 3, you can get an IB certificate. Is that correct, Mr. Odom? Or you can go the full IB route and go for an IB diploma, or you can just take an IB course here or there. So there's not exactly like you enroll into a program. You can do piecemeal, or you can do the whole thing.
Well, let me ask you this. Is there a way to find out if we've had any students that have had no IB exposure at all, but have become athletes, just for information?
I can ask Mr. Spurlock to
that may be something
provide that information.
Do on Thursday. You could just email
Now,
to the board members.
Now, he did provide us the information that I shared at the beginning, that there are 36 students who are attending Oakland right now on zone exemptions for the IB program, and 11 of those are student athletes.
And I look at it as kind of an unintended consequence, maybe, like Dr. Burns said. You know, we were so anxious to make sure that Oakland had an opportunity to.
Well, and that's difficult too, because, you know, there could be that they get into the school and then realize that the IB is not for them, but they're already, like we said, they don't start to their junior year typically, so they're already well into the school. They've established their high school roots, and we don't typically pull them out in that situation, you know, unless there are behavior issues, things like that.
I think we've all been extremely pleased with how Oakland has progressed over the last several years, so I certainly wouldn't want to be one for that to be a distraction, to take away from that success.
Mr. Hodge has one more, then I'll get you.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just want to understand, so the issue is, if somebody wanted to transfer into Oakland and did not express an interest in IB and they check, yes, I want to play athletics, right now they would not get in, is that correct?
Yes, we don't typically honor.
But most of the applications going into IB or into Oakland are for the IB. I can't think of maybe but one that is not for the
That's
IB.
my point, is this now become a way around that prohibition, is to say, yes, I want IB, yes, I want to play athletics? I mean, is that the issue?
It could be, I don't know if it is an issue.
I mean, you can't prove it, but I mean, is that what
No,
people are?
that's the reason I
worried
want to
about?
bring it up, and, for no other reason than that.
I guess I'm going back. What is open enrollment then? Forget the IB program, what's open enrollment?
I'm not aware that the board has ever passed anything that says open enrollment, but they have told us that because Oakland High School has space that we can approve zone exemptions to that school, and so it's been a de facto open
As long
enrollment.
as they provide transportation, we've always had it.
Yes, sir, but they still
Well, the
apply for a
schools
zone
have
exemption.
availability, yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
But
That's no different than any other school that has availability, though. It's not necessarily open enrollment. I think those are two different things. If they can apply for a zone exemption, if both principals agree and there is space availability, we typically let them go. That's for any school, though, that has available space.
If they got space availability, that Mr. Spurlock approves it, and they got athletics on their thing, how can you deny that?
We're not denying any, Mr. Hodge. We haven't denied any. We held the 13 to ask for input from the board.
Forget the IB stuff. You know, all these people raising these issues, these principals raising these issues. You know, what if Mr. Spurlock called out here tomorrow and he says, XYZ school out here is recruiting? Are we gonna bring it to the board?
The board policy on zone exemptions is that we take recommendations from both principals, and typically if both principals agree and there is space available, we approve it. Now, there are times with other schools and with Oakland that if another principal does not agree for some reason, we review that application and determine whether or not the child should go. It's not automatic approval. So the other principal does have input in the decision,
Normally, if it's an athlete, that other principal won't agree.
Well,
typically.
Answer me this, on these applications, how many of these principals, I guess, the large majority of these principals deny it?
Are we talking about a regular zone exemption or?
Well, the zone waiver is what you gotta have to go out here. Do they deny it?
To which school?
Oakland, I'm talking about it, you know.
Not necessarily.
No, sir.
What we do on zone exemptions, we basically label certain schools overcrowded, which ultimately results in those schools not taking zone exemption. Now, in the particular case of Oakland, in a regular zone exemption, we allow students to go there because in retrospect, they're doing the overcrowded schools a favor in that they're offering some relief. However, if there's something if they are playing a TSSAA sport, we're almost always going to deny that pursuant to the two principals agreeing, right?
Yes, sir.
And we do the same the other way around. If a kid from Oakland wants to go to Riverdale, wants to go to Smyrna, we try to protect the integrity of the athletic program. Matter of fact, I've had a lot of the principals say over time, we've done the best job ever at eliminating recruiting and making sure kids that play sports go to the school that they're intended to play at. Which is what precipitated by just putting this on here, was just to give information that a lot of these kids that are going over there, we're not advocating, and I've said it 3 times, I'll say it a 4th, I'm not advocating that we pull the plug on doing this. We can carry on as usual, but I thought that the board ought to know that some of these guys, many of them are athletes, and you should be aware of that.
But I'll say, in closing, that I'm still mighty disappointed it's even been brought up. And I think it's been unfair to Mr. Spurlock when y'all investigated, asked him if he's recruited, or any of his coaches recruited, he told you no, that all been into it.
Well, first of all, I don't know why you think it's unfair to bring it up. I think that the board has a right to know that these things are being said. And secondly, no one has accused Mr. Spurlock of anything. I don't think he would put up with it if he knew it. And secondly, if I caught a coach doing it, they wouldn't be coaching anymore. So, but I still want you, Mr. Hodge, know that it's being said, and if you want to keep doing business as usual, we'll do that, and I presume that we do.
Doris?
I think discussion is healthy. I don't like innuendos that go around under the table and things being said that aren't brought to the surface. It's healthy to air your issues and solve them. We've sat here, we encourage IB or academics, number one. Secondly, we encourage every student athlete to be involved in academics as strongly as they can. Too many years ago, we had problems with this accusation of recruiting, and we never, I don't recall there ever being a discussion about it. This is, to me, this is healthy. Maybe you don't like it. Maybe it's not something you wish would surface, but in the long run, we'll go away and we'll say the principals will understand that we're welcoming the students because of the academics. Secondly, because they want to be student athletes, and we'll all say that, recruiting is not acceptable here, but student athletes are acceptable here.
Can we pursue the possibility, think about the possibility of an IB program at Laverne High School?
Yeah, I mean, if
Come
that's what
back.
the board wants to look at, we look at
Is
it.
the board would,
I'd like to just kind of jump in here. This IB program, certainly a good program, and I'm proud that we have gone along and supported that. I think the IB program, it's costing the county some money to have this program. And we should encourage it to be used as much as possible. I'm not sure that I understand this toe in the water type thing with IB program, and this has nothing to do with the athletic thing, what I'm saying. I'm just wondering about a child taking, or student taking a class or two, or what, and how that has an impact on teacher and student ratio. How do we determine where they're going to go when you have AP classes and other classes there? So that, in this discussion, it's kind of brought that to my attention. Another thing that's brought to my attention is the open enrollment. That's going to change. Open enrollment, we're almost to the point that Oakland High School doesn't need to be taking every student that applies wherever they are from. So that's going to, in a sense, take care of itself. And then something else I've thought about is that with our new magnet school and with our magnet schools that we already have, our elementary schools that had middle school grades, they have a lot of student athletes, and they're pretty good. They've had some excellent teams at those places. So, and we're encouraging the athletic program at Central magnet school. So I don't think athletes going to participate in the IB program is anything that we should necessarily be surprised at because of the participation we've had with athletes in our magnet schools in the past. Just some observations, and I'll just leave it there.
Does the board have any interest in pursuing it to see what the cost and everything would be to put IB program at Laverne High School?
I'd like to see it, yeah.
Anyone else? Everybody would, can we just, I mean,
Sure.
just look into it and see what that would be? Go ahead, Doris.
Thurman Francis, academic school, but it's got 7th and 8th graders there who are not the magnet students. Could that, if we talked once about maybe an IB program in the middle school area, would that be a possibility for?
We met, Ms. Hodge, Mr. Odom, and myself, met with Ms. Eaton to talk about, it was a natural, and we hadn't done anything on it, a natural fit for maybe Oakland Middle to do it, right across the road and implement parts of it. It's kind of preliminary, but we may be coming back to the board here in a few months, talk a little more seriously about it.
All above fifth grade advances are all K-5, because we had middle schools, those are only magnet students for 6, 7, and 8.
Are they? Okay.
They go to Smyrna Middle.
I'd like to echo what Mr. Gill said too. I've actually talked to Mr. Spurlock personally and explained to him that no one here is accusing him of any sort of inappropriate behavior at the school, or recruiting or otherwise. We were simply just bringing forward a concern from some other schools, and I think we're all proud of what the team at Oakland has done. Their graduation rate has improved phenomenally. So it's not in any way an attack on Oakland. That's not the intent of this tonight.
Anyone else? Mark?
Wasn't there an issue when we first started the IB that students had to take certain courses in middle school? They were worried about how that was going to work. I haven't heard much about that.
Yeah, Don, there was French and something,
Yeah,
I don't know,
foreign
foreign languages or something.
I really think that that the middle school IB, pre-IB program, just virtually every student in the school is considered pre-IB. In other words, they have those offerings. Typically, it's a foreign language or something because of the number of foreign language courses, because most IB leans a little bit more heavily to liberal arts. It's a little heavier in that. So I think if you declare it, I think it just kind of becomes a pre-IB school. You just got to make sure you got certain foreign languages and that sort of thing. The IB cost, there's some that's related to that annual fee. We pay for training. We pay for training for teachers in AP, and we pay for training for teachers to do IB. IB is a little bit more expensive because there's not as many of them. They tend to be a little bit further away. But they can get an IB certificate. I can tell you before we started at Oakland, we visited Williamson County and some other places that were doing it. And I was really surprised that they'd had it a number of years, and they were talking about actual IB diplomas, maybe 12 to 17 students and all. The full program is really tough. That they do kind of start IB as a freshman in that they have to plan out and get those foreign language courses and other things that prepare them to take. The testing starts where the tests are sent off, actually graded out of this country generally, and at juniors and seniors. But there is a plan to get them in that position with the courses. But a student that takes those courses, if they take enough of them, and I can't tell you right off the top of my head how many is IB certificate, but usually they're either IB certificate or possible IB diploma if they score high enough on that international test.
I just want to make sure that students at all of our middle schools can get the courses they need to prepare themselves to go to the IB. That's what I'm getting at. Is that the case? Right?
The toughest thing is the number of foreign language courses. That was, if you remember, Mr. Vaughn was talking about it when he first came here, because of some of he was trying to work a way into getting some of the foreign language started in 8th grade and that sort of thing to accomplish that. So that seems to be our biggest hurdle, is the number of foreign language courses they would need. But we've been able to do it. We've been able to do
Start
it.
those in middle school then, that's what I'm trying.
No, we've been able to do it, but they're doing some doubling up, because obviously the ones that are going through this year, that'll be possible. And I talked to Mr. Spurlock about this a little bit. There's a number that are at that point this year, because this is this the third year, I believe? But he said probably the group next year will be actually the better indicator, you know, of those that are really able to go through it, because you will have 4 years under your belt.
Any other questions? Don?
No. And I'd like to divorce athletics completely from my discussion here. But to say we have an IB program and students enrolled in it, it appears to me that those students would need to be working toward one of those criteria for IB recognition. If they're not working toward that, then they're not in, and it appears to me, the IB program. And of course, that only begins in the junior year, if I understand correctly. I'm a little bit concerned about that. And once again, I'm saying, you know, I'm not talking about where they play any type of sports at all. I'm just talking about a student that's at Oakland, and Oakland happens to be the only school we have the IB program in. So I just am having a hard time grasping the thought of an IB program with students that's just kind of in and out. If they're going to take up space and participate in it, look like they ought to be taking the number of classes that would end up with them having the privilege of taking the IB test.
It is, you know, a number of students. We have the majority of students that'll take an AP course and never take the exam. The reason is they want it on their transcript as they apply for college. And of course, then they have to pay for the exam. Same is true with the IB. Was it $86.50 for an AP exam, something like that? We talked about this a couple of years ago. So you have students out there that they go and they know IB has a lot of possible influence, you know, for colleges and all later on. So when they're thinking about this, very often as a freshman year, they want on their transcript showing that this kid is taking some IB courses, this kid's taking some advanced placement courses in hopes that it'll help them scholarship time and all later on. You know, I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to do it anytime this year. Somewhere down the line, you could look at your Explore score or something and say, you know, add that to it. But that would be a local thing if you did that, you know, because you're not held out of an AP class or an IP class now based upon, you know, a prior score or criteria.
Don, let me respond to it. That's a good point you raised. Over at MTSU, we have an honors program, and it's not exactly analogous to IB, but it's the same idea of smaller classes, more advanced curriculum, moving quicker. And the requirements to graduate with an honors degree are tough. They're stringent. You got to take so many hours. You got to write a thesis. You got to do these extra things. They don't get many graduates. The number's going up slowly, but it's not a huge number. But when you look at the overall program, it's pretty big and healthy. And it's because of the same dynamic that we're seeing with the IB, I think, is that people do want to move in and out. There might be a course or two they want to take under honors because it's something they're particularly interested in or particularly strong in, but they don't have any interest in going all the way and getting an honors degree. So if you say that you're either in or out, you're either moving toward the ultimate certification or degree or you're not, you're really going to shrink the size of the program. And I think a lot of that is probably true with IB as well. Just by definition, there are going to be people who take a course or two, and that's all they do. And you have to ask yourself, are they getting value out of that? Is educational value being transmitted there? And of course, you got to balance that with the cost too. I understand.
And I can appreciate that fact, but I don't know what I'm saying is that I don't know that those students that are just taking a class or two would be considered, quote, in the IB program, and therefore, if you do not have open enrollment, those students would not be given an automatic zone exemption.
Well, but that's not really an issue now, because we have plenty of, there's not a shortage of space for the IB
Right.
program at this time.
Yeah, well, okay, so you're talking about in terms of admission down the road, when space does get tight at Oakland, do we need to specify some minimum
Yeah.
commitment? Well, that's a different thing, and maybe we might need to.
Yeah, I mean, and I'd have to go back and research, but it would be nice to know that if you signed up for the IB program, your first 2 years, is there any kind of separate requirement made of them than the person that's just zoned into Oakland, not pursuing an IB degree? I think that's where Mr. Jernigan's getting at too, isn't it? And I don't think that there is there?
There's not, and I think what Dr. Burns is saying is it's kind of that old saying that a rising sea raises all ships. It's the overall influence on the school. It has the potential to affect everyone, whether or not they're full bore going for the IB certificate or not.
Wayne,
He got it.
any discussion? I think we about wore that one out.
So if the board is okay with this proceeding as normal, we'll proceed.
I would like to know the answer to that question. You know, do we have students that have enrolled and never darkened at the IB door?
I could get you a pretty simple answer to that based on, I can go back and look at how many zoning exemptions we approved to Oakland over the past 2 years compared to the number that he's given us here, that there are 36 on zoning exemptions that are in the IB program, however you want to define that.
Well, but it ought to be relatively simple to say if they got 36, to see if any of them never participated in IB.
Sure, what I'm saying is, if there's been 60 applications approved and we only now have 36,
Well,
but
let's pursue that tomorrow, because I think it's a good point. too.
If you want to, again, you can just email us rather than having another large discussion.
Okay, let's
Thank
move
you,
on.
James.
Number 10, race to the
Race to the
top.
top application. First of all, the pace has been fast and furious on Race to the Top, trying to get where we are, and I want to commend Mr. Odom and instructional staff and also the principals for their sage input on what we should and shouldn't ask for with respect to approval of the application. But our 4-year allocation of the state's $250.5 million is $3,645,960. By May 14th of 2010, we must submit a first-year application for at least 25% of the funds. In developing our RTT local scope of work, we must identify actions that align with the state plan as listed in the elements of the state reform plan, which you can see tab 2. After reviewing our Tennessee Comprehensive System Planning Process document and soliciting suggestions from our schools, we are requesting a first-year allocation of $1,161,665. We could request the entire dollar amount, but you don't have to. Obviously, we want to use it over a 4-year period. And we're going to recommend that you approve the recommended Race to the Top local scope of work request for 2010-2011 as presented. I'm going to ask Mr. Odom to go over that, but just quickly, we try to consider input from the principals. But at the end of the day, we did take that input, but we tried to prioritize what we thought would where we get the most bang for our bucks instructionally in the county. And Mr. Odom, if you would, you want to take a few minutes to go over what we're proposing?
You should have a sheet in your handout that kind of is our application. Mr. Gill is correct. We would first receive this information that we would have till the end of June. The state thought that, but when the feds visited Nashville, they told them that the clock started ticking on, I believe it was March 29th. So they said now for us to get it in on the May the 14th. Due to the water, they're extending it 2 or 3 days, but you still have to turn in something on May 14th. So anyway, this is kind of our application. The REA, Mr. Keith Cornelius, their REA president, did attend the meeting in Nashville with me. where they went over this. We've communicated, so he's aware of also the documents here. Principals made suggestions. So, I don't know how detailed you want to take a look at it. One of the other issues is if we take, currently Ann McCraw knows, the state wrote the application for lots of teacher training, and it's based upon the new standards and the new evaluation system that will involve, involve training them on value added. That's the situation. So what you have now is the state kind of wrote it different from what we needed, because the state really doesn't educate students mostly at York Institute, the School for the Blind, and that Governor's School in Knoxville. So we're looking at programmatic needs. Ann McCraw right now gets funding for Title II that we train our 2,800 certified people with. She always has an allocation for next year, which is about the same as what we've been getting. We are hearing preliminarily that the government may reduce drastically Title II year after next. So what we're doing this first year is doing programmatic needs a lot, and then we'll look, and by this time next year we'll have an idea of whether that Title II is gone or not, and how much more we might need to shift or something to do our training, okay? The first one is employ an assessment data research program manager. We're saying this for 4 years. If you do anything that has recurring cost, if you guarantee the position longer than that or recurring cost, then it has to be signed off also by the county commission. So what you have to look at it and see if by then this becomes a regular program for us. But there's another sheet. If you do not have this sheet, it's also on the computer, I know. They told us if we wanted to describe in more detail than this small box, if we would like to write about a half a page, so you'll find a little deeper description of what's in this little box on another sheet which says Rutherford County's Race to the Top application description. So as you get a chance, if you want to before, or we can print you one of those also, but it is online. The other one is purchase software and train teachers in the use of Compass Learning software. They did tell us on the very front end of this that much of the application was written more strongly for high school and for middle schools. One of the reasons being was dealing with the new graduation requirements associated with that. So there is a little heavier in the whole state application. Everything that we write has to meet one of the state elements. And so while we were looking at Compass Training software, it is a software program we would own. It's not subscription to where that you pay $600 to $700 per student that goes online to do it. But it allows us to use this for credit recovery, for grade recovery, possibly students that are in ISS or that sort of thing. This one is really teachers teaching. They watch the video, they respond, it's interactive. It's a good, strong program. So that's why we're looking at that. And that's our biggest expense, something like $425,000 in that particular case. But I think it's something we need to do to assure the graduation rate as we go to the 23 credits and try to stay above a 90% graduation rate. The next one is provide training and roll out principles of technology 1 and 2. This comes from the state's requirement that every student in high school must have, that's a freshman this year, must have a chemistry or a physics credit before they graduate. If a student takes Principles of Technology 1 and 2, they will have met their physics requirement. So we're trying to purchase the modules and train the teachers that it will allow us to put in place for the students who would not normally take regular biology, regular chemistry or physics. They could take the Principles of Technology to meet that particular requirement. It's a career and technical education course. Basically, we have offered it in the past, but this is what the state board allowed in order to help address that. So they are the ones that created that. Looking at your next activity, provide teachers with access to local grade dashboard, engage parents by the Star Parent Portal. You talked about this once before, where parents can go online, check attendance, can check progress of students during the grading period, and see how their student is coming. It allows online access. Amy, we've done some surveys. About a little over 78% of our parents have internet access. So as a board, I would think this is something you would really like because your parents can get more interactive. We need parents as our partners. And to do that, we have to give them access to information. This would do that. First year cost, we got the bid from the company, $58,725. Next year, it would be like $55,000. Mr. Mays went to a session in 2013. This parent portal is supposed to be a permanent feature of the STAR state system. So we think before the 4 years are out, this will become a part of actually the state system based on the information he received. Train teachers and purchase software for implementation of Read 180 at Holloway High School. This is the only thing in here that's really kind of for one school. And you know, Holloway's kind of our second chance high school, but we have a very good success rate there. They're up in the 80%, about 87, 88% graduation rate now. Of course, 90 is required. But in their analysis of students coming there, one of the things that we see is they have difficulty reading. It's still a problem for many of those that enter that school. Read 180 is a research-based. It's been around for a number of years for that. We talked, again, with Mr. Bridgman. They're on that 4x4 block system there. He does have a person that they can train to teach it, and they should be able to get to 90 minutes per day. But this would be primarily for their sophomores. Most of the kids that enter there are sophomores, or they're in their second year of high school anyway, even if they don't have enough credits for high school. But that, again, is $39,950. Creating online professional development. We have 2,800 almost certified employees. One of the things that we need to begin doing is being able to tape, record, make online access to some of our professional development people. Now, you can subscribe to this and pay so much a teacher. There's a number of companies out there that's doing that. I really would like to see us be able to continue to tailor our in-services to fit Rutherford County's need, what comes back on our test scores and that sort of thing, which we've been able to do. But we're fast approaching with the numbers we have, not being able to do that. And we actually have a group coming to talk to us about it. This can be expanded once get this capability to do some distance learning that you might have if you had a teacher out for a while and you didn't have something. We could take a class from Oakland and broadcast it to students at another school, say, to see that. If you had a physics or chemistry or hard-to-fill position or something. So that's a capability that we'll look at dealing with that. So that we can house and do our. That's mostly kind of hardware and training costs to get that in place, is what you're looking at there. Train teachers and purchase kits from math out of the box. This is your main thing here for elementary. And it's not a hands-on science because they do not get a kit for each unit. You train teachers and they get the box of math, materials, manipulatives, hand manipulatives, and they use it all year long. So what you're doing here, and we look at saying second and third grade, is to start there to try to increase the concept understanding for students in the lower grades as they work through elementary by providing those manipulatives for the teacher. The last item is staff development assessment for interpretive standards evaluation and differentiated instruction. We're putting some training there because at this time, this will go through, first year will go through June of next year. By then, we're going to have the new state evaluation system we're going to have to train teachers on. Tennessee is signed off as one of the achieved states. We're signed off on the new national standards. New national standards, actually, we're supposed to be, the last comment was today. And it was on English language arts and mathematics. So Tennessee will be adopting the new national standards, which will start into effect next year. So our training a year from now is going to go up on both evaluations and make sure there's national standards. So that's our recommendation. And again, we had to do at least 25%. But the reason we didn't really do more is we want to see where this evaluation, where the new standards hit, and see what we need to have that flexibility, see what happens to Ann's normal Title II funds, to see how much shifting we need to do. It's kind of an unknown.
I suspect there'll be more questions tomorrow night after people get a chance to look at this, but are there any questions now? Grant?
I assume that you can modify this to a certain degree, but I know your deadline's getting fast approaching, so I applaud what you presented to us as well. I understand it, yeah.
That's true. Anything not spent will roll over to the next year up until, the fourth year is what we're being told. And we can amend as we go along. And you'll want to do that. You're probably going to be increasing your amount normally for professional development. We did hear one little piece of the puzzle today, that the feds may require the state to do 4 years estimate. I hope they do not, but if that happens to us, we'll be back.
So two things come to mind. I mean, it's pretty strict with respect to how we can spend it. I mean,
Very strict.
Very strict guidelines. And secondly, I mean, we have had a lot of input from stakeholders with respect to how, you know, how we're spending the money. And I do see a lot of benefit in what we got here, and I appreciate the hard work done.
This can't be this can't replace things that's normally in your budget and that sort of thing. So, I mean, for people that's listening to us and think, why don't you do this instead of the budget, you cannot. It has to be something that's more unique than that.
Mr. Blair?
Maybe more of a comment. My understanding is Tennessee and Delaware received this funding because we were already ahead of the curve on having data-driven information to share with the feds. And I think employing this assessment manager is going to be critical in order to share that data with them once this money is received. And I really commend having that position available. It kind of reminds me of trying to go through a rezoning without a GIS person. It's extremely difficult. So I think this is really going to work out well for us.
By July 1st this year, we're supposed to make sure every certified person in our system has access to TVAS. So we're about to go into a training curve to make sure that people can take their data and use it, because you're going to evaluate teachers based upon that. I mean, you can see the potential liabilities and the other factors associated with that. So that's where we are.
Any other questions on this? Let's go on to number 11.
Student discipline appeal. The board has been requested to review the Thursday, April 22nd, 2010 decision of the Disciplinary Hearing Authority to uphold the expulsion of a student from Eagleville High School. The student was expelled for 1 calendar year under the board's zero tolerance policy for possessing a weapon on school property. This review is pursuant to the provisions of policy 6.317. Policy states that the board shall review the record, report, and shall, 1, affirm the decision of the DHA, 2, overturn the decision of the DHA, 3, modify the decision of the DHA to a lesser penalty, 4, grant a second hearing, which would be before the board, 5, deny a request for a board hearing.
As I understand on this one, the main issue left is whether he gets to graduate to March with a student. Is that right? Is he already? Huh?
Yeah. I don't know how much I can discuss on this, but yeah, this person will graduate. I mean, provided he's got the grades, I presume he does.
Yeah, but it's like to me, the issue is whether they're allowed to.
Well, I think the issue is whether he marched.
Yeah.
And the procedure in place that says, and matter of fact, we formed this in conjunction with the high school principals about 4 or 5 years ago. It says if you, for example, if you perpetuate a zero tolerance offense the first semester and you earn your way out of the alternative school back into your regular school prior to graduation, you can participate in graduation. However, after 10 days of the second semester, if you commit zero tolerance infraction, which is defined by law with respect to what it is, then the superintendent can modify, which is to put him in an alternative school, but it's that drop dead date to participate in graduation is 10 days into the second semester, which this obviously occurred well after that date. So that's the reason they wouldn't be able to participate in graduation, because of procedure.
Okay. Let's go on to general discussion. I want to say something before we start anything else with general discussion. Chastity's here, and I understand we're losing you, but I want to tell you that I personally, and I'm sure the board does, appreciate you. You have tried your best, I believe, to print what was said and try to be as accurate as possible. I know everybody makes mistakes at times, but you've been fair as far as I'm concerned. Anything I've told you or you've asked me, you've been fair on the way you reported it, and I do appreciate you, and I hope the rest of the board does. I think they do. We'll miss you, but congratulations and good luck on your follow her career.
Wish you well.
She's going to graduate school. Anybody, did you say something when I missed
Well,
it?
is it open discussion time?
Sure.
Want to commend the picture of you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Jernigan on the website. Y'all.
Couple of
really
good-looking
cute-
fellows, then.
Well, really cute couple, actually. So, the other thing, Mr. Gill, and with everything that's gone on in my life here the last couple of days with all these floods, I walked out without my book. Is there going to be an opportunity, or do we need to just come and see you personally and maybe talk about some things within the proposed budget? You know, just to discuss them, or we're going to have another opportunity to. I mean, I don't have a bunch of things, because we don't have a lot of room.
See, I think, I tried to establish last time there wasn't, you know, it's pretty much the same services as last year
Yes, sir.
versus Indiana, but just any way you want to deal with it. When was our next scheduled meeting? Joyce, do you know?
We don't have one scheduled, Mr. Zendick.
Rick had mentioned maybe we wanted to set another one.
Mr. Zendick plans to.
Okay.
So we will have another meeting. I suggest that if you have a question on the budget, to go see Mr. Gill before that time, if you have a specific question, and then he's saying, I don't know when I'll have time, but, and then when we do have another meeting, we can have some things to discuss it. It's like he says, it is pretty cut and dried, and it's not changing a lot, so I don't know, but I'm sure there are some issues in there that we can discuss.
Maybe a tweak or
Yeah.
two, who knows?
Grant?
Not a bad idea to also talk to your county commission representative in your areas, because many times they get hit with this and they'll understand the whole program. Sometimes if you get with them a little bit ahead of time, they might be a little less resistant to.
We had a pretty good write-up in the paper the other day about what we were trying to do and how we conserve
Well, yeah, I
funds.
think the mayor and also the finance director said they appreciated, you know, how we basically protected our fund balance so that we could open those schools without a property tax increase. Kind of gave me the impression they weren't going to do anything with respect to try to take anything away from us.
That might be close to accomplishing a miracle, isn't it? Opening two middle schools at the same time,
And a magnet school.
and magnet school without one.
Doris?
Why, Chastity's got her head down. Know she's going back and work on her master's degree. I'm hoping she's going to go ahead and add a teacher certificate to that and then make application to our system.
There you go.
I guess you found out we kind of like you. Anyone else? Meeting adjourned.